say that we are extremely grateful as a group, both to the local 242 for being our host here today. We're also very grateful for the fact that Kemper Development Company has been sponsoring our programs twice a year for quite a few years, and we are benefiting today from Bob's expertise. As you probably know, he worked for the Washington Policy Center, and then he worked for INREX, and now he's finally got a job with Kemper, so that he'll have more stable employment. But he's really a wealth of applied economic expertise to these transportation problems, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from him.
Okay, well, I guess I don't need much of an intro other than that. Thanks, Will. Geez, I've never had so many nice things said about me. Normally, people just rip on me online on Twitter. Well, as he said, I do have a background, college degree in economics, but just like anything else in this world, you can apply economics to pretty much anything. And some of that is dealing with transportation. And since I'm here to talk about not developing, well, I guess somewhat development, but also what it means to retail and all the other mixed uses that we have. So for those of you, how many of you have not been to Bellevue Square? Okay, good. We can get one more person there. No, we get about, somewhere around 27 million visits a year. Bellevue Square is obviously a retail environment. We have a lot of office, so Microsoft, Eddie Bauer, Pokemon, a bunch of tech companies, WeWork, Bank of America, you name it. We have tenants of all different types. We recently expanded to do a new 450-foot building called Lincoln Square South. So our property is essentially Bellevue Square, Bellevue Place, Lincoln Square North, and Lincoln Square South. Everything from retail to high-end condos, high-end apartments, so on and so forth. So getting people to and from the marketplace is absolutely vital. But I think we all understand the fact that how freight needs to move. It's not a surprise that we need constant shipments. When you're in entertainment as well, we have a ton of restaurants. Beer shipments every day, food shipments every day. That's not a big surprise to any of us here in this room, that we do need a well-maintained system to take those heavy freight trucks and buses that use the roads. But I wanted to also talk about how many employees a retail establishment needs, and being in an office environment, we also have employees that, they don't work for us, they work for Microsoft or Eddie Bauer, but they still come to our property. And so that's why Kemper and Bruce worked there for many years prior to myself. That's issue number one, is how do we get people to and from the Bellevue collection properties in a quick, efficient, and safe manner. And obviously, as many of you have alluded to, these roads are assets, and assets provide a return. And we want our assets to provide the largest return possible, which is the smooth movement and efficient movement of people and goods. The problem obviously comes when assets turn into a liability. And I won't sit here and rip on Sound Transit too much, but that's sort of what we've seen in rail systems and highway systems too across the country, is that due to neglected maintenance, MTA in New York, Washington Metro had to shut down for safe track had to shut down certain lines for a long time. The Chicago area is also seeing some of this. We've had BART issues on maintenance. We've seen this all around the country, and they've really turned into a liability to where we need to make sure that the rail system we are building at an astronomical cost, and the highway system that we currently have and hopefully will expand, we can hand this over to our children or our grandchildren, or if you don't have that, maybe a dog or something like that, and give it to them so that it's not a liability, so that it is an asset. We don't want this falling on them, just like the national debt, just like blah, blah, blah. You don't want this loan to carry over, or this debt. So with that, I want to touch, and I'll finish up with, or I'll talk about what Bill Pop actually just asked in a question, because it did require a long answer, but I look at everything from traffic flows on a stop sign to state and federal transportation policy. And for an example, with growth management, and one of the concerns that we have is that we built a new building, a state-of-the-art building, beautiful, but we can only build the mousetrap so big as congestion keeps people away. We're seeing that in Seattle right now. Oh, sorry, we're based in Bellevue, if you didn't get that. As you can tell in Seattle, I've got my reservation in for NHL tickets. I am on the list, and I'm scared as hell about actually going into South Lake Union, to the point where I might just sell them. So a lot of people, though, are starting to look at the east side of the state. Some areas, I mean, I-90 in Spokane gets congestion. The interstate bridge, as I mentioned, the Columbia River crossing, has quite a bit of congestion down there. So it's not just a Puget Sound issue, although that's obviously where probably 95% of the congestion resides. But, you know, we don't want Bellevue or Spokane or Boise or any place in this country, not just in this state, but to start losing its economic advantage, to stop allowing people to come and go as they please on a safe and efficient road network. And so to get back to that, what we've seen, for example, is the city has upzoned downtown dramatically, as well as is looking at upzoning a neighborhood across from 405 on the east side. And the transportation planners or the city planners, not transportation planners, but city planners ran the numbers. And it just shows massive gridlock at all these intersections to where traffic doesn't move. And I asked the city planner just straight up, I said, well, did you at least model adding one lane to 116th, kind of the principal arterial through that area? No. I go, why not? And he said, well, because induced demand. So they don't even model it. On 405, obviously the lifeblood of our retail, our business, we have workers, holiday workers, we have temp workers come into Bellevue Square. They're coming up from Kent, Auburn, all the way down from Marysville, as we saw the growth on Mike Lindblom's chart, Mount Vernon, as far east as probably Cle Elum to come to work. You know, when the state was looking at expanding I-405 south of Bellevue to Renton, they gave two options: tolled and no bill. Instead of looking at all the different options available. Instead it was not doing anything and just a tolled option. So that's where my role comes in, and I take a look at the different options, and I run my own models and do my own analysis. We spend a lot of money on those models, but you know, to try to maximize and it's not just for our properties, it's for all Washingtonians. We've come up with modeling that could be easily replicated anywhere else in the country for any major metropolitan area, a similar situation. So, you know, maintenance and preservation, we got to keep maintaining that asset because it is an asset that gives us a return. The moment that it turns into a liability is when things start getting scary. You know, it isn't sexy to go, oh, hey, we need to replace the water pipe to your neighborhood. It's going to cost, you know, how many tens of millions of dollars. You're like, yeah, but I get water now just fine. So I've got to pay more to get what I've always received. But obviously in this case, you know, this is a key critical asset, and we also need to look at expanding and maximizing the use of that asset. So with that, I'll call it good. Yeah.
I'm curious, where is Bellevue and Kemper Development? How many parked cars do we have now?
Do you want to know at this very moment? I can get that.
Yeah.
Well, we have close to about 12,000 parking stalls.
How many?
12,000.
And you generate 27 million
Yeah.
trips in a year.
About that, yeah. Well, but I think that also includes pedestrian and others, so it's not just automobile trips, yeah.
I would, go ahead.
No, it's Scott's next, but you finish your question, Bruce, please.
I wanted to take this opportunity to say that I worked for Kemper, with Kemper for 28 years. I never heard him imply or say directly, Bruce, remember, don't forget all roads go to Bellevue Square. And he had a perspective that was much larger around the Puget Sound area when we did several reports and models on where improved were necessary. And so he was concerned about the whole region. And worked and thought that way rather than just all roads go to, Bellevue Square in our project.
That's right. Yeah, I look at anything from transit systems over in Spokane to what's going on in Puget Sound to what's going on down in Vancouver to, obviously I also look at other, like I mentioned, WMATA and New York and Chicago. So I'm constantly looking at those as well. What are they doing in Houston? What are they doing in Austin? Just to see kind of the different approaches that go along with that. Scott.
Yeah, one of the
Other Scott.
Bellevue successfully implemented was the coordinated signal system, which increased the capacity 10% or so in rush hour. Any other things on the new technology front that you see out there that can be helpful?
Well, that's another point that I was going to make too, is that a lot of these technologies, what's coming in transportation, depends on a well-maintained road network. It depends on paint being there where it should be there. And it depends on, either V2I, vehicle to infrastructure, or vehicle to vehicle communications, which require other infrastructure pieces. So as we talk about maintenance and preservation as well, look to future technologies too, because they depend on a road network and actually a transportation network, I should say, that is well maintained. Otherwise, these technologies, it's only as strong as your weakest link, right? And so if maintenance and preservation is the weakest link, which I'd probably say with the stories coming out in the news and the No on I-976 campaign, they've definitely made maintenance and preservation an issue, although the voters didn't seem to think that that was too persuasive. But these technologies depend on it. So in order to get the transportation system of the future, we need to maintain and preserve our roads today. And so that's where I see this going, at least with future technologies. Yeah, Scott.
So you're talking about the adaptive traffic signal system that Bellevue spent money on. They did a study and they found out that the $1.5 million that they invested in was actually tripled in cost savings to road users
Sure.
in the city of Bellevue. And when we're talking about these kinds of systems, what's happening is that government agencies are starting to see things like signal coordination as a crutch to get them by so they don't have to conduct a more intense or probably more cost-effective project in the long term. So for example, if you have an intersection that's operating poorly, you continue to optimize that intersection, but what you really need to do is build a grade separation. But we're not investing that kind of money in cities in Washington. We're saying, well, the money isn't there to do this, and so the city has little choice but to try to optimize their way out of actual infrastructure construction.
Yeah, and I'm going to pivot off of that and actually say one thing that we don't see at the local or state level as much as we should are real benefit cost analyses. I'm sure if you did that on maintenance and preservation of projects, that's a no-brainer, but instead, many projects move forward with I'm going to pick on Sound Transit again. Sound Transit 3 won't hit a 1.0 benefit to cost ratio until the year 2070. And even then, you're going to have to replace it probably 2 to 3 times over. So But instead there are projects that we can do today that Vic pointed out are on the books that have a high benefit cost ratio. And maintenance and preservation likely has a high benefit cost ratio. And so those types of things, whether it be signal or, adaptive signal systems or, building some sort of a grade separated thing, we should see more of that. Instead, what we're seeing, at least on the city level, is, well, we know we can't expand capacity like our citywide plans show we need to. We know we need to get this off-ramp off of 405, but that's an $800 million project. We know we need to expand this road downtown, it's on the books. But instead what we're going to do is allocate a large portion of the CIP, which is the city budget, to bike lanes. And that's taking away capacity and just giving it away to bikes when bicycle demand is about less than 1% of commute mode share. And despite that these intersections are saturated and have above 0.95 volume to capacity ratio.
What we feel good about.
Well, so at a time when we're experiencing rapid growth, especially in downtown Bellevue, with Amazon bringing upwards of 20,000 people there based on some square footage calculations, maybe even 25,000, right, Scott? And is now the time to be giving away limited capacity to modes that, especially when it's raining, you'd probably have to travel to Eastern Washington to find them. So, Vic? Oh, go ahead.
Well, let me just say that David's raised his hand, and I want to take this occasion to thank David for filming this program for us today.
Oh wait, this isn't going public, is it?
It will go up on our website, not too distant future, like we did last year with the program as well. But the difference is that last year it cost us $800, and this year you've given us an $800 contribution.
There you go.
I really appreciate it.
Hopefully you didn't have to pay for lunch. Yeah.
Take an extra sandwich when you go home.
Okay.
Okay, you had somebody else. Did you have another question, or because I have a question for you that's
David's got one and Vic has one.
okay.
So I'm David Hobowitz. For those of you who don't know me, you might best know me as one of the founders of StopForFlatTolls.org, but I'm also one of the folks at ETA. I'm also on the Transportation Committee of the Sierra Club, and I'm a hardcore bike commuter when I have a place to bike to. That said, I get to hear both sides of this, and I understand or see both sides of this scenario. While we're about the preservation and maintenance, we keep throwing out there sound transit and things like that.
Right.
I kind of want to challenge this question, and I've given a lot of thought to it myself, and that is, there's the one side of we need mass transit in as big a way as we can have it, to one person, one car, and the spectrum that we have. And what I'm challenging is that finding a solution that doesn't require the big cost and the big expense of mass transit and the things that we don't like about mass transit, everything from getting a cold from the guy that you're sitting next to or getting mugged, to it's just very inconvenient because I have to drive somewhere to get on that train, etc. So then there's the other side of it where we're all in these cars and we're all in our world trying to, there's a limit to how many of any of these resources we can do. Can we find a solution that takes the best of both of those and actually doesn't have the expense of mass transit?
Yes.
But doesn't have the, at least perceived, overwhelming.
Absolutely.
So that's what
Absolutely
I
we can. It already exists. The King County Metro van, there are good van pools all over the state. This state is well known for van pools, whether in the Tri-Cities, which has a lot of van pools that go to Hanford and back and all over the place, to Pierce Transit, Community Transit, King County Metro. I believe all of those are in the top 10 van pool fleets in the country. And van pools are a good suburban to urban commute vehicle. It's at basically bare minimum cost to the taxpayer, only for capital infrastructure, and it actually makes transit agencies money because the federal grants are based off of passenger miles traveled, of which van pools travel a lot, and they generally carry a lot of people. So van pools are a moneymaker for transit agencies from the feds. They're good for suburban to urban commutes, exactly the type of commute that, Sound Transit Rail to Issaquah is trying to get, or to Everett. Those are exactly vanpool type scenarios. I mean, King County Metro has more vanpool riders than LA Metro. So we do have a solution that works. The problem is, though, is that transit agencies tend to see vanpools more as competition for their services. And so they don't really put a lot of money in expansion, or at least massive expansion of the vanpool fleet. A person that I talk to all the time is Chuck Collins, who used to run King County Metro, and he's a good friend. And we talk all the time, and he was basically the father of the vanpool fleet, I guess we could say. And as Kemper likes to talk about, a guy came into his office one day and said, "Hey, I've got this idea for a vanpool," and Chuck Collins kicked him out of his office because, not because the idea was bad, but because the idea would work. And so Chuck Collins invited him back a week later and told him exactly that. So we have an enormously successful vanpool system that would be perfect for the exact type of thing that you bring up. So it's transit, it's flexible, it doesn't have much, the capital infrastructure is already there if we maintain it, and it doesn't require huge operating subsidies. Yeah, Vic.
So the next evolution of that, in my mind, is going to be this ACES thing, autonomous, connected, electric, and shared, which will be a positive that. And that just tees up my thought here as I was reading this month's Institute of Transportation Engineers magazine. They were talking about the cost of the autonomous vehicle technology. While it's come down dramatically, the task that the computer has to figure out what the human eye sees is absolutely enormous. And this article was making the case, and this is how it gets back to what we're talking about here, is that for a portion of those tasks that the LiDAR and the cameras and the radar and the sonic stuff is all doing and trying to assimilate and bring into an instantaneous decision on the part of the car as to whether that person is actually going to move out into the street or not. You have to put the brakes on. That's enormous.
Yep.
But if you had a pole on the side of the street that was looking at what's going on its very limited space, like maybe 500 feet around it, and knows for sure what status quo is, and can tell that there's a movement out there, and communicate that movement to the car, that would reduce by order of magnitudes the task of the onboard computer on the car to know what's going on.
Sure.
What that means is that would mean that we'd have to have some public infrastructure at the side of the road that's going to have electronic connection or however, and that's a life-based system that if it fails,
Yeah.
the whole traffic safety thing kind of doesn't work. So that's got an element of the preservation and
Sure.
maintenance stuff that's going to come into play on our public works arena in the urban areas to start with. And because of the enormous cost benefit to this autonomous thing, it's probably going to have to be part of the discussion.
Yeah.
I'd like to conclude with one last question it follows up on your ACES question in some ways, Vic, to Bob, because you've been kind of monitoring the development of these electronic enablements of cars. Are we going to, in the fairly near future, get to a point where when cars are communicating with each other, in most instances, where we're going to be able actually to narrow lane width and actually add capacity because we can go to 9-foot lanes rather than 12 or whatever it would be.
Yeah. Scott's probably the expert on that, not Lampy. Sorry, Lampy. Well, I think so, but I think I would caution that I don't think that just on existing infrastructure is enough. I think we need to continue to expand and improve infrastructure as well.
I do too, but I'm thinking in terms of all the pieces that can be put together to resolving this multi-billion dollar kind of problem. Clearly, if we could have 8 lanes on the 520 bridge
That would be
rather than
nice.
6, well, 6 plus a bike lane, then, you know, we can add capacity in some places if technology will allow us to do it safely. And I'm just wondering how close we are to that.
Well, a lot of roads are being narrowed down to almost that.
Not for the purpose of making
I
them safer.
understand, yeah, and so I think the answer to your question is yes. Just exactly how that communication works, I think it's still up in the air. Yeah, Scott?
So I can give maybe a 1-minute answer to this question.
Go ahead.
Number one is that we are not going to see wholly self-driving vehicles on roads for at least 15 years, with the exception of some segments of probably rural interstate highways. And I'm working on an international effort right now trying to understand how these machine vision systems in cars, which are in cars you can rent right now at the airport for lane keeping systems, how they interact with the roadway environment. And what we are finding is that there is a significant lack of funding devoted to the maintenance of pavement and pavement markings and roadside delineation. And all 3 of those roadway infrastructure elements are critical pieces of the machine vision puzzle. Now, as far as how are autonomous vehicles going to increase the reliability or the capacity of the system, I don't think we have a handle on that yet. I think some of that is fairly esoteric discussions and people who have thrown these things out there in theory, but the reality is that human beings are going to share the road with partially automated and some fully automated vehicles for the next 20 to 25 years. And 20 to 25 years is the planning life cycle for a lot of infrastructure improvements. So Bob is absolutely right. Autonomous vehicles are not this, they are kind of pie in the sky, but they're not the magic bullet. They're not going to absolve our public agencies of the responsibility to maintain and improve infrastructure to meet the demand that exists already and has existed and has not been adequately addressed for the last 15 years in this state.
And no one is going to dispute that point with you. What I'm really trying to do is to figure. Yes, you are, Scott.